स्मरण स्मरण करो नाम रे मन में जपन कर हरि नाम रे स्मरण स्मरण करो हरि नाम रे हरि ओम भजरे सदा हरि ओम भजरे सदा हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ आनंद आनंद हरि नाम रे नाम रे हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ हम जपन करो हरि नाम रे स्मरण स्मरण करो नाम रे जपन करो हरि नाम रे स्मरण स्मरण कर नाम रे ओम हरि ओम भजरे सदा हरि ओम भजरे सदा हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ आनंद आनंद हरि नाम रे हरि नाम रे हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ हरि गुण गाओ हरि नाम गाओ गौरी नंदन गज वदना गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गजमुख नाधा गजमुख नाधा गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गणेश वरदा गजानना 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 ओम गजवदना गजानना ओम गजवदना गौरी नंदन गजवदना गौरी नंदन गजवदना गणेश पाहि गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गजमुख गणनाथ गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गजानना 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 ओम गजवदना गजानना ओम गजवदना एकदंता गजानना एकदंता गजानना हे रंबा गजानना हे रंबा गजानना एकदंता गजानना एकदन्ता गजानना हे रम्बा गजानना हे रम्बा गजानना 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 ॐ गजवदना गजानना ॐ गजवदना एकदन्ता गजानना एकदन्ता गजानना हेरम्बा गजानना गजानना एकदन्ता गजानना एकदन्ता गजानना हेरम्बा गजानना 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 ॐ गजवदना गजानना ॐ गजवदना गौरीनन्दन गजवदना गौरीनन्दन गजवदना गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गजमुख गणनाथ गजमुख गणेश वरदा गणेश वरदा मां पाहि गजानना 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 ॐ गजवदना गजानना ॐ गजवदना गौरीनन्दन गजवदना गौरीनन्दन गजवदना गौरीनन्दन गजवदना मुरे घन श्याम रे श्याम रे घन श्याम रे श्याम रे घन श्याम रे श्याम रे घन श्याम रे गोविंदा गोपाला श्याम मुरारी मोरा नंद लाला गोविंदा श्याम मुरारी मोरा नंद लाला श्याम रे घन श्याम रे 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 मोहना माधवा मेरा प्रीतम ब्रजबाला मोहना माधवा मेरा प्रीतम ब्रजबाला श्याम रे घन श्याम रे श्याम रे घन श्याम रे श्याम रे घन श्याम रे घन श्याम रे वंदना नागरा पांडव रक्षक परिपाला आनंदना नागरा पांडव रक्षक परिपाला श्याम रे घन श्याम रे 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 रे घन श्याम रे। श्याम रे घन श्याम रे, श्याम रे घन श्याम रे। ॐ सहना भवतु, सहनौ भुनक्तु, सह वीर्यं करवावहै, तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शांति शांति शांति। Together we will chant verses 10 to 20 of chapter 4 Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, 10 to 20 verses chanting. वीतराग भय क्रोधाः मन्मया मामुपाश्रिताः बहवो ज्ञानतपसा भूता मद्भावमागताः ये यथा मां प्रपद्यन्ते तांस्तथैव भजाम्यहम् मम वर्त्मानुवर्तन्ते मनुष्याः पार्थ सर्वशः काङ्क्षन्तः कर्मणां सिद्धिं यजन्त्य इह देवताः क्षिप्रं हि मानुषे लोके सिद्धिर्भवति कर्मजा चातुर्वर्ण्यं मया सृष्टं गुणकर्म विभागशः तस्य कर्तारमपि मां विद्याकर्तारमव्ययम् न मां कर्माणि लिम्पन्ति न मे कर्मफले स्पृहा इति मां योऽभिजानाति कर्मभिर्न स बध्यते एवं ज्ञात्वा कृतं कर्म पूर्वैरपि मुमुक्षुभिः कुरु कर्मैव तस्मात् त्वं पूर्वैः पूर्वतरं कृतम् किं कर्म किमकर्मेति कवयोऽप्यत्र मोहिताः तत्ते कर्म प्रवक्ष्यामि यज्ञात्वा मोक्ष्यसे शुभात् कर्मणो ह्यपि बोधव्यं च विकर्मणः अकर्मणश्च बोधव्यं गहना कर्मणो गतिः कर्म यः पश्येत् अकर्मणि च कर्म यः स बुद्धिमान् मनुष्येषु स युक्तः कृत्स्नकर्मकृत् यस्य सर्वे समारम्भाः कामसङ्कल्पवर्जिताः ज्ञानाग्निदग्धकर्माणं तमाहुः पंडितं बुधाः त्यक्त्वा कर्मफलासङ्गं नित्यतृप्तो निराश्रयः कर्मण्यभिप्रवृत्तोऽपि नैव किञ्चित् करोति सः. So we have been studying the topic, the second topic, how the self, supreme self, relates to activity, what human beings are engaged all the time. So what is the role of the self in the human activity? Human beings are acting all the time, working all the time, producing duties and responsibilities. From the day when you are born till the day you are passed away, you are acting all the time. Inaction is death, action is life. So the constantly human being is acting, but the source of all action is the supreme self. So what is that source? What is the self? That is the topic we have been delving for past few weeks. Now we are in the mantra. This verses start from the 11 to 20 or 11 to 18. Now we are in the 15th mantra. We have completed last class. So we are going to take up 16th in today's class. It is actually till 18th verse they are there. So what actually we covered in the previous class is that the ancient seekers, having known this, having known that the God, the Supreme Self, is the prime mover of all actions, having known this, action was performed even by the ancient seekers of liberation. Action is never stopped. You can never have resignation or retirement from obligatory duties and responsibility. You got to perform till the last breath of your life. Even the great ancestors of the Arjuna, Krishna saying that they are all understood the great ultimate goal of self-realization, but they never gave up the activities, performing the action. Therefore, you also perform following the ancient sages, ancient seekers, as the did in olden times. So you must follow, because Arjuna got great respect for his tradition and ancestors and culture of the past predecessors. So ancient seekers of liberation knew the subtle relationship between the self and the action. Having gained the knowledge, by they continue to perform, engage themselves in activities, duties and responsibilities. Having gained the knowledge of Supreme, they never stopped acting. Krishna appeals to Arjuna, in effect communicating to all entire humanity his feelings and respect for tradition by referring to the wise men in the past. In earlier verses, he had appealed to Arjuna with Arjuna's reasoning. Now he is using the emotion, devotion for the ancestors, and using that emotion, he is appealing Arjuna to engage himself to fight this righteous war. Having thus prepared Arjuna with both reason and feeling, Krishna concludes powerfully, therefore, You also must act, means you have to, because Arjuna is shirking, trying to give up the duty of fighting the righteous war. He is emotionally upset. He is depressed that his own relations, his own kith and kin in the opposite forces, and he has to kill them, so he could not take the scene. He collapsed in the battlefield, mentally shattered, paralyzed, so he has to be resurrected. So Krishna has been continuously delving into the subject to resurrect him and get back to the battle to fight. Therefore, you also must act as the wise man did in the past. So using the Krishna, using the feelings of Arjuna towards the ancestors, how did they act? So as the role model, he has to also perform action. So the self, the Atman within, the God within is supreme. It is the ultimate source of all action. It is the purest being, the infinite, the immortal being is always immaculate, pure. It is the source of all activities. But action does not taint the self. It has nothing to do with the any action, whether good or bad or neutral. Action type of activity executed by the individual never touch the supreme self. It does not. Self has no desire to perform any action, nor any objection to avoiding action. Neither it has got any interest in acquiring or enjoying the fruit of action also. He has no interest in acquisition or enjoyment. Self has no desires. Self has no acquisition or enjoyment interest. Self is pure and immaculate source of all action. Without the self, nobody can act, but self has no desire to perform an activity, neither it has got a desire for enjoying the fruit of action, nor acquiring and enjoying the results of action. The results of actions never affect the self. It do not in any way affect the self. Therefore, you are the self. You are not the body. You are not the mind. You are not the intellect. You are the Atman. At this moment, you have lost the cognition of the Supreme Self and got caught up in this individuality. And you believe yourself to be this physical body, mind, and intellect. And you lost the identity of realization of the self. So you are that supreme self. You are immaculate. You are pure. No actions of the body, mind, and intellect will affect the self. You are the self. So you are never affected by any action, emotion, thought. Right now you are affected because of your unintelligent association and identification with the material equipment and lost the cognition of the self. So you have nothing to acquire. If you are identified with the self, you become the self, you realize the self. Then onwards, you have nothing to acquire or enjoy the world because you are Atman, you are fulfilled, you are whole, you are complete, you are infinite. There is no more you need anything from the world. With this knowledge clearly instilled in you, by gaining the clarity of real identity, you are that Atman, you are that supreme, immaculate, pure, paripurna self, Atman. You become the self, you must act without any involvement in the affairs of the world. So once you identify the self with this knowledge clearly instilled in you, to become the self, you got to act. You must act without any attachment or involvement in the affairs of the world. How? By like an actor on the stage. You find that actors on the stage, they always maintain their identity of their personality while acting on the stage, on the movie, as a particular character role. They act beautifully. is a great actor, we say. In the comedy or a tragedy or any kind of a role is given as a hero or a villain or whatever the character role, he performs to the best of his ability in that character, but in and through his character, he will never forget his real identity as the particular actor. Therefore, similarly, take up your role in this world detachedly like an actor on the stage. Perform your obligatory duty and responsibility, and to the best of your ability you can. Through such action, you will reach the ultimate state of immortality, the realization of the Supreme Self. That will give you complete liberation from this bondage of this world and suffering and sorrows. This is what we covered in the last class. Now we get on to the verse number 16. We will chant the mantra. Verse. Kim karma kimakarmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tatte karma pravakshyami yajñatva mokshase shubhat. Kim karma kimakarmeti kavayopyatra mohitaha tatte karma pravakshyami yajñatva mokshase shubhat. So this verse translation, what is it telling? Even the wise, the kavayaha means wise people with wisdom. Wise means people who have knowledge. Even the wise are deluded. Interesting. Deluded. Mohitaha. Mohita. Moha means delusion, confusion, no clarity. Even the wise are deluded here, means in this world, as to what is action and what is inaction. Akarmaha, akarmanaha. What is action, what is inaction? The wise people at times gets deluded, confused. They get confused between the distinction of action and inaction. Therefore, I shall teach you action, knowing which you will be liberated from evil, says Lord Krishna in this verse. So he is beautifully explaining the distinction of action and inaction. That is all the time confusing, because what is the true action? What is inaction? So what is a particular, means what is the obligatory duty and responsibility you got to perform? What are the not duties you don't have to perform? This clarity must be there for everyone to get on in this world, to live life. Therefore, it is the direst need of every human being who is trying to live a life of peace and success in this world and also reach the ultimate state of perfection. Therefore, Lord Krishna guiding us to gain that knowledge so that you perform perfect actions to reach the ultimate state of enlightenment. So this verse states that even the wise are confused regarding action and inaction. So a human being is made up of spirit and matter. Spirit is the Atman within, and the matter is the physical body, mind, and intellect. The body executes actions, perceptions. The mind feels various emotions and feelings. The intellect conceives various thoughts and ideas. But the self within, the Atman within, is the prime mover. It does not act. Self has no actions. But without the self, action cannot emerge. Self does not act, but when the self functioning through the material equipment, self identifies with the material equipments, action manifests. So the electricity has no light, the bulb by itself has no light, but when the electricity contacts the bulb, then there is a brilliant expression of light. Similarly, God in human being doesn't act. God has no actions. The material equipments cannot act by themselves. The body by itself cannot perceive, cannot act by itself. The mind cannot feel by itself. Intellect cannot think by itself. The Atman contacting the body, mind, intellect, then activities emerge. So the material equipments by themselves no action. It is out of with the self contact. The body, mind, intellect experiences the brilliant life. Actions performed through this ignorance. So actions performed without realizing this ignorance result in accumulation of vasanas, desires. So if you do not understand the distinction of the self and the body, mind, intellect and their reference with the actions, if you don't know the distinction, you get caught up in ignorance of this combination and you get into involvement, attachment, and you perform actions, and those actions will lead you to creating desires and vasanas. That is because of ignorance of the distinction of the self and the material equipments. So once you develop more vasanas and desires and you're running after this external world, consequently you get agitated, mental agitations. You get mental agitations. Therefore, by knowing the nature of action, by clearly understanding the distinction of the how the action emerges from human being, what is the inactive principle, the supreme God within that personality which is combined with the material components manifests the action, one has to clearly understand through the knowledge. Then therefore knowing the nature of action and the source and its source, you will not accumulate desires, vasanas, and you will not be agitated, and agitations also cease because you understand that it is the self is the source, not the material equipment. Therefore you got to identify with the source. You understand while performing your obligations or activities with the knowledge, you will become thus liberated from the world, from the bondage of this world, from the agitations and sorrow and suffering. You get peace and bliss, happiness. This is the clue. That's what happens. What a great poem which talks about this great understanding, the distinction of perfect human being and imperfect human beings, who understands clearly the distinction of this inactive principle of the supreme self and the body, mind, intellect which executes actions. The combination of the self and the spirit and the matter there expresses the life of activities. So the clarity is the distinction of inaction and action. When you have that clarity, you understand the purpose and the mission of life is to realize the self. So you become introverted, You stop chasing this world of materiality and sensuality and accumulating desires and vasanas. You stop running after, and then you reduce your agitations and consequence suffering and sorrow, because you have shifted your interest and attention from the world, from the actions, to the inactive principle, which is the self, which will help you to liberate from this bondage of the world. Is the technique given in this mantra by clearly, even though wise people confused. So this is clearly depicted by the great perfect human being of village preacher, Oliver Goldsmith. A great poem gives this clear message of what the whole world is running after, and this wise man, or the perfect human being, who is not interested in the world but interested in his duties and responsibilities with detachment, because he has got higher values towards the supreme God and reaching the self. That is called Village Preacher by Oliver Goldsmith. Is the 36th page in poems book, is the greatest message we are going to learn, so that we will implement these principles in our day-to-day life for gaining the peace and bliss and liberation, and ultimately reach the enlightenment as well in this mantra. So the great poem Village Preacher by Oliver Goldsmith, what he says, we will try to read it and get the message from the village preacher. So it is a simple poem communicating a great perfect human being. Oliver Goldsmith describes the village preacher, portrays the human perfection. A perfect human being he was. He lived in the small village because he is anchored to the highest values of self realization. A preacher's personality serves as an ideal, a great ultimate goal for all human beings to strive and reach. The village preacher led a modest life, a peaceful life, a life of contentment, fulfillment, satisfaction, happiness, not enamored, not attracted, not pulled by these worldly affairs, by the attractions of this world in the modern society. He is not attracted at all. He was more skilled, more talented in all aspects, but to use the skill to raise the poor, to raise the needy people, than to rise himself. He is never bothered about himself. He is always bothered to serve the community first rather than serving himself. That is the greatness of the village preacher. Even dutiful, ever dutiful, 24/7, no holiday, no weekend, no vacation, no break. Today, everyone wants break for weekend or vacation or holiday. Nobody understands the life principles. Ever dutiful and charitable in nature, always accommodated, always sacrificial, attitude, disposition. He used to be charitable. The poet compares the preacher to a bird leading its fledglings, its chicks, from their nest to the open skies. How the bird draws the nestlings to train them towards the bright skies. The village preacher also allured, attracted his fellow beings, all his neighborhood, whoever came to him. He always tries to draw their attention towards the open skies, who are actually caught up in the affairs of the world, to a greater and nobler life of himself, and led the way. He lived those principles as a leader and shown the path to those fellow beings The last few lines contain another beautiful metaphor in the poem, comparing the preacher's life, the preacher as a tall cliff, a tall mountain. That cliff rises above these valleys and hills, and midway leaves the storm. The clouds are left in the middle of the mountain. That is the personality. The cloud represents the emotions are at the heart, at the mind. Never unsettle the head. All disturbances of rain and storm remain below the level of the mountain's breast. So at the chest level, the sun shines eternally above the mountain's peak. So too, the preacher, the perfect human beings, feelings and emotions are universal, spread to everyone. He engendered beautiful kindness, positive emotions, love and affection towards everybody, but never any emotion unsettle, disturb his mental composure, mental peace. His intellect always anchored to the highest ideal he has set for himself, which is the perfect human being, because he understands that self is inactive principle, as that village preacher ever fixed his attention on the suns, which is represented by the sun here. Sun shines eternally, speak. So too, preacher's feelings and emotions for others remained with the heart. They never undisturbed his serene attunement with the supreme reality, the Atman, the God principle, which is the source of all activity. So the beautiful poem communicating the great message. So we are going to study the beautiful poem and gain that message also. Near Yonder Cups, the Village Preacher by Oliver Goldsmith. Near yonder copse, when once the garden smiled, is describing the beautiful garden where the village preacher used to live. And still where many a garden flower grows wild. So the garden flowers, plenty of them are growing everywhere. There were a few thorn shrubs, the place disclosed. Near that there are shrubs, means bushes. The place disclosed. The village preacher's modest mansion rose. A village preacher's house was there. A man he was, to all the country dear. He was such a great, perfect human being. Whole country used to adore, love him dearly, and passing rich with 40 pounds a year. He used to live a life of modesty, life of rich in heart with simple lifestyle, standardized everything, never running after this mad world of acquisition and enjoyment. He has a 40 pounds a year, passing rich with 40 pounds a year represents he lives within his means. Whatever is satisfied, he is contented with what he earns and never dissatisfied, never craved for anything more and more. Now everyone in the world craving for more and more and suffering and sorrow because of lack of contentment, lack of fulfillment. Their desires are endless. Even though they are acquiring more and more, their mind is constantly agitated. There is no taboo to acquire more, but never never connect the present happiness, never link the present happiness with the future acquisition. If I get that, I'll be happy. If I get that, I'll be happy. You can never be happy. You have to be happy in the present and acquire more. You can plan to acquire any amount. There is no taboo. Whole world you can acquire, but any moment you must be contented, you must be satisfied, you must be able to make your mind peaceful in the present, and then you can acquire. Never link your present happiness to the future acquisition. Is that what the great village preacher used to live? A man he was, to all the country dear, passing rich with 40 pounds a year. He is rich, but not exhibited, not craving for more and more, satisfied with whatever his modest living. Remote as passing rich with 40 pounds here, remote from towns he ran a godly race. So remote from towns he ran his godly race. So he is not attracted to the modern cities. He is not craving for this thing. Remote from towns he ran his godly race. He is interested in the introversion, interested in the search of the perfection within rather than the chasing in the kanchanam, the acquisition and enjoyment. He never nor ever had changed nor wished to change his place. He is not changing his mind based on the worldly circumstances and situations. Don't change him. Nor ever had changed nor wished to change his place. Unpracticed he to fawn or seek for power. He is not interested in name, fame, power, position, status, all these worldly things. He is not interested. His goal is the highest, the perfection in human being. Therefore, unpracticed he to fawn, to seek for power. He is not craving for power or position or anything. He is just enjoying his whatever work he has done and is satisfied with this. By doctrines fashioned to the wearing art, people change like a fashions change. People are carried away by the change and mentally disturbed by the changes, but he is changeless. His nature is always fixed without getting into the changing world. For other aims his heart had learned to prize, because he got a higher ideal in life, a nobler ideal, a unselfish goal in life. He would like to help the community at large. His goal is to serve the society. Therefore, for other aims, his heart had learned to prize, more skilled to raise the wretched than to rise. He is not interested in personality to grow, but rather he is interested in serving and helping the others to grow, the society grow. That much great attitude he has got. More skilled to raise. He is very skilled, very talented, but he used the skill to uplift the poor and downtrodden, to uplift the unskilled people around rather than interested in his own egoistic arrogance growth of his personality in life. More skilled to raise the wretched than to raise. His house was known to all the vagrant train. His house is like a lighthouse. It's like ashram. Everybody who is seeking some needs, some rehabilitation, some freedom from their problems, some issues, maybe financially, from materially, from emotionally or intellectually or spiritually, every level people used to come to him, used to serve them, sacrificed. His house is known to all the country dear. His house was known to all the vagrant train. He chid their wanderings and relieved their pain. So he corrected their pursuits and their useless time wasted in these worldly affairs, and he chid their wanderings, how they are wasting their life instead of working for a great purpose, great cause beyond the routine mechanical existence of squandering their life. So he chid their wanderings but relieved their pain, because the pain and suffering is directly proportional to your ego and egocentric desires, selfish life. Everybody has to understand this law of life. What is that? No selfish person be ever happy and suffering less. Always suffering and pain he will experience if you are selfish. But no, it is also true, the law that no unselfish person can never be unhappy, always be happy and suffering less. This is a law. So if you want to be happy, you want it to be happy and painless, you got to be unselfish and sacrificial within your being. You got to live that life, is the lesson given by the great Oliver Goldsmith's village preacher. So he is talking about he chid their wanderings but relieved their pain. The long remembered beggar was his guest. His guests are not like great rich people. Anybody who is in need, that's what he's telling. Even though a poor person comes to home, he used to embrace. Long remembered beggar was his guest, whose beard descending swept his aged breast. The ruined spendthrift, now no longer proud. The fellow who is beggar and spendthrift, people who squander money and became beggars. That is another fellow. He also was another friend. He used to help them out and claimed their kindred there and had his claims allowed. Now the third one is the broken soldier. A soldier who is handicapped, he used to take care of him as well. A broken soldier kindly bade to stay. He requested accommodation and food, so he provided. The village preacher's unselfishness is nicely portrayed here. Sat by his fire and talked the night away. So the soldier also used to share his experiences of the battles. Sat is by fire, wept over the wounds or tales of sorrow done. So after explaining everything, shouldered his crutch and showed how fields were won, how the battles were won. He is explained. Pleased with his guests, very, very contented and happy with all these small people around the village preacher. He is happy, pleased with his guests. The good man learned to glow. He used to be always smile face of Paripurna, the man of perfection. Is contented, fulfilled, happiness is within him. Therefore, he always used to glow from within and quite forgot their vices in their woes. So they have done so many vices, they have mistakes. Every human being is a combination of positive and negative attributes, but you got to focus on the positive aspects rather than the negative aspects, is the message given. Quite forgot their, always learn to forget their vices and in their woes, because the vices means the negativities always give them suffering. They are already suffering with the negativities. You also need not add them something more, is the essence of this message given. And quite forgot their vices in their woe, careless their merits are their fruits to their faults to scan. So he is not interested to pinpoint their mistakes and point at fingers at others. Careless means he used to ignore their mistakes and faults, and their merits are their faults to scan. His pity gave ere charity began. His love and affection, his pity, is sympathetic, his heart is gone to the all these people, poor people, suffering people, and then his service and sacrifice began. His pity gave ere charity began. That is a great quotation, which you, until unless you have the establishment of love and affection, you cannot do service and sacrifice. Thus, to relieve the wretched was his pride. So he is dedicated to relieve the pain and suffering of the people around. The unselfish and sacrificial attitude lived that life, the great perfect human being. Therefore, he is ever peaceful and blissful, and perfection in human being he reached, because He always dedicated his life to raise the wretched. That is his pride, and even his failings, even his shortcomings, his failings lean to virtue side. So whatever he did, whether good or bad, always happened to be good because of the attitude or intention is to serve and sacrifice. So even the failings lean to virtue side. That's a great capacity of a human being, is to be pure at heart, so that whatever happens for good to you. You got to maintain that faith like a perfect human being of village preacher. But in his duty, prompt at every call. Even at midnight, somebody knocks the door to take the ambulance and help him to take him to hospital. He's ever ready, never says no to any call. But his duty prompted every call. He's always ready and duty minded to serve and sacrifice of all the obligatory duties, never say no to anything. So human being is supposed to perform his daily regular duties, nitya karma. You got to perform your regular routine obligatory duties, daily duties, and occasional and special duties, which is naimittika karma. Any visitor comes or any emergency or have got to go to hospital, or any guest visitor comes, you got to say serve and sacrifice. You can't say no, I am busy in my routine. That is not the life of a perfect human being. You got to accommodate a occasional and special duties, which also part of the human responsibilities. So in his duty, prompt at every call, he watched and wept, and he prayed and felt for all. He watched them carefully, means he observed them and helped them and corrected them and brought them to evolutionary path of peace and bliss, and prayed. Also prayed means served and helped them and felt for all. Always used to have pure love and affection, a universal love for everybody, for all. And how he acted is given as a beautiful the anecdote, the mantra, the example is like a bird. He is lived like a bird. Each fond endearment tries to tempt his new-fledged offspring to the skies. He tried each art, reproved each dull delay, allured to brighter worlds, and led the way. So bird, what it does, it always attracts the nestlings which are in the nest. They are in the nest, they can't find their feet because they are very small. So the mother bird trains the nestlings to draw them from the nest, feeding the food step by step from the nest to the branch. Gradually they take the food and go back to the nest, slowly. As a bird, each fond endearment is so much endear, so much love and affection. With that, it is training them to grow like a mother bird. What it does, endearment tries to tempt means attract to its new-fledged offsprings, is the nestlings. They brought to these things to the skies. Slowly, it attracts to the until they get wings and they go fly by themselves. The mother will not leave them without training. Similarly, the village preacher, the perfect human being, exactly does the same thing like the mother bird for the people around who are in the need of development or peace and happiness, service. So he tried each art, he explains according to the person's necessities, he helps them, he gives them whatever they need. By trying each art, reproved each dull delay. When they are lazy, when they are tamasic, when they are suffering, he is trying them to come out of that laziness which is causing them suffering. Reproved means he is giving them a is like a therapy, reproved each dull delay. Allured means attracted to brighter worlds, a sattvic life, a life of peace, life of success, life of dynamism, life of enlightenment, allured to brighter worlds, life of heaven, and led the way. He is the role model. He led. Adyadacharati sreshtaha tattadeva itara janaha sayad pramanam kurute lokastadanuvartate. He is the leader. A leader is one who does what he having his knowledge, he practices in his life, and then shows them the way to lead others also to lead the follow the suit. So allure to the brighter worlds, allure to brighter worlds, and led the way. So that is the role he played as a village preacher. And then beside the bed where parting life was laid, and sorrow, guilt, and pain by turns dismayed, the Reverend Champion stood. So there is all the worldly fluctuations. He is like a rock seated. Everything happens in and around them. A perfect human being never unsettle, disturb his mind. So Reverend Champion stood. At his control, despair and anguish fled the struggling soul. Comfort came down, the trembling wretch to rise. So he gave the comfort and happiness for the wretched people, trembling people. And his last faltering accents whispered praise. So at church, with meek and unaffected grace, he looks adorn the venerable place. Truth from his lips prevailed with double sway, and fools who came to scoff remain to pray. So there are ups and downs of people who are variety people who people come for insulting, throwing bricks at them. Some people praise. Everybody is in and around used to support him because he always maintained the life of truth and service and sacrifice. Fools came to scoff, remain to pray. The fools means the innocent people, the ignorant people, they used to scoff at him. What is he doing like that? But they also remain to pray. The service past, his service is great service he has done. Around his the pious man with steady zeal, conviction and confidence, with conscience, he is committed to the ultimate goal of service and sacrifice to the poor. Each honest rustic ran. Every person of the village were helped by him. Even children followed with endearing while. Even the children around the village were following his great, lifestyle, and plucked his gown to share the good man's smile. So beautifully, they used to flock around this great village preacher. His ready smile, a parent's warmth expressed. He always used to have the beautiful, pleasant countenance of smile face like Lord Krishna in his face. Prasanna Vadanam. So it's always pleasant, peace radiating through his face itself. His ready smile, a parent's warmth expressed. Their welfare pleased him and their cares distressed. So he always felt happy, pleased him by serving their welfare, helping their welfare, and their cares distress. So their worries and anxieties he would like to remove, but he used to feel bad about them. He used to feel pain in his heart that their whatever their pain, he used to feel the same pain. That is the identification of universal love and affection he used to engender in his heart. So that is the beautiful the metaphor is here. The personality of the village preacher is communicated, is compared to a tall mountain where the peak is always in tune with the sun above, the light is radiating on the sun's, the peak is connected to the sun, but at the mountain breast level, the clouds are there around, which is compared to the emotions. The intellect of the village preacher is connected to the sun, which is the supreme self, the Atman, ever anchored. The heart, the mind level, always the emotions there for everybody who approached his universal feelings, and for everyone approached him. That is the comparison. He lived a life of perfection. So a perfect human being, his love and affection is there for everyone, but never his emotions are governed by external agencies. He always controlled his emotions under the surveillance of the powerful intellect, because the intellect is ever anchored to the supreme God, the Atman. Therefore, his emotions are under control. If you do not have emotions, you are a stone or wood. If you have emotions and get controlled by the emotions, you are leading a life of an animal. Animals operate at the level of the mind. They don't have capacity to control the emotion because they are not provided the intellect. Only a human being has this capacity to control the emotion by the virtue of intellect. So once you have powerful intellect, which is with through Vedantic knowledge, to connect to the supreme self with the intellect, you will be able to govern these emotions, and your emotions also purify and chasten and cultivate positivity around. That is the beauty of this, the final stanza he gives in the poem of this personality of a village preacher. To them his heart, his love, his griefs were given. Is all his love and affection and his identification with everyone. To them, to all the people, his heart, his love, his griefs were given. All their sorrows are his sorrows, his happiness, their happiness, his happiness, his total identification with them. But all his serious thoughts had rest in heaven, but his intellect always anchored to the supreme God, the Atman, never disconnected from Atman within. At the back of his intellect, he is anchored to the self and self alone while he is enjoying the emotions. But all his serious thoughts at rest in heaven, as some tall cliff that lifts his awful form, swells from the vale and midway leaves the storm, though round its breast the rolling clouds are spread, eternal sunshine settles on its head. So the sun always touching the head means the peak of the mountain, but the clouds never disturb the sunlight which is enjoyed by the peak. So, as some tall cliff, the mountain swells from the vale and midway leaves the storm. So, the storms means the fluctuations of the world will upset your joys and happiness, pleasure and pain, honor and dishonor. Everything happens in the breast level, in the mind level. Mind as the emotions. Emotions will be fluctuating, but never, if you have a powerful intellect, the emotions will be under control. That is the dignity and prestige of a human being. Human being alone, God designed and capable of governing the emotion and channelize the emotion for the reaching the divinity. That is the beautiful mantra, beautiful verse he is talking about in the village preacher. The Oliver Goldsmith, same thing here. The karma, the actions and emotions can go on, and akarma is the inactive principle, the supreme self within, convey more than their literal meaning. From the relative point of view, karma encompasses the desire ridden activities. People all over the world, they are acting because of the ego and egocentric desires, which produce the mental agitations and deposited as a vasanas, and that lead you to suffering and sorrow and caught up in this birth and death cycle. But the vasanas, the innate nature. When a good desire propels your action, you deposit good vasanas. If your desires are bad, you will deposit bad vasanas, propel your action. Karma here could be equated to all devolutionary actions and evolutionary actions. So, if you are acting any action which is desire ridden, they are all devolutionary because they are depositing vasanas, either good or bad, punya or apunya, because they are propelled by vasanas and deposited by vasanas because of desire ridden activity. So, the moment you actions without desire, then the existing vasanas will be exhausted and you reach the ultimate state of enlightenment. So, whereas akarma covers all the desireless actions, human being is designed to perform duties and responsibilities without desires, means desire to reach the ultimate state of enlightenment only, no other desire. That such actions, desire free actions, dedicated to the higher altar in life, such actions will not produce vasanas, desires, and therefore you will not be suffering and you will not be sorrowful, and you will also eradicate the existing vasanas and reach the purity of supreme self, the Atman. Furthermore, they exhaust your existing vasanas and purify your personality. This is the greatest technique given by Lord Krishna. For an absolute point of view, karma could represent all actions, whether evolutionary or devolutionary. In that case, akarma would indicate inactive self, the Atman and Atman alone, that supports both all activities, whatever type of actions. Therefore, a perfect human being always executes a perfect actions which only lead to the achievement of the supreme self and merger with the self and reach the immortality rather than cultivating the vasanas and caught up in the birth and death cycle. He will be only living a life of liberation, is the guidance given by the verse 16. We'll continue verse number 17 in the next class. Thank you very much. Hari Om.